man with a dark secret was waiting in a parking lot. He had expectations in his pocket and an evil plan in his mind. For 3 weeks, he had trusted a girl on the internet and planned this moment. He got out of his car to meet the person he had in mind. But what awaited him was not the prey he had planned, but a detective. And at that moment, not just a car door, but the door of his life closed in his face. Here's the story of how the law protects children in these shadowy corners and why these operations save lives.
The investigation began like hundreds of others conducted by Internet Crimes Against Children task forces across the country. An undercover officer created a profile on a social media platform commonly used by teenagers, posing as a 14-year-old girl named Emily. Within hours, adult men began sending messages. One of those men was David Sullivan, a 42-year-old sales manager, married with 2 teenage children of his own, living in a quiet suburban community. To neighbors and colleagues, he was a normal middle-class family man. But his online behavior revealed something darker. Detective Lisa Chun, who'd been working undercover operations for 6 years, recognized the pattern immediately. Sullivan's initial messages seemed innocent, commenting on Emily's profile picture, asking about her interests. But experienced investigators know this is how grooming begins. They start friendly, building rapport, establishing themselves as trustworthy before gradually introducing inappropriate content. The grooming process is methodical, Detective Chun explained in training materials. They don't immediately proposition children. They establish themselves as friends, confidants, someone who understands what the child is going through. They normalize age gap relationships. They slowly introduce sexual content, testing boundaries, seeing how the child responds. By the time they suggest meeting in person, they've spent weeks or months building a relationship. Over 3 weeks, Detective Chun documented every interaction with Sullivan. He asked about Emily's family situation, school life, whether her parents monitored her phone. He sent compliments that became increasingly sexual. He introduced topics about relationships and intimacy. He began sending explicit images and asking for images in return. All of this was documented: screenshots, timestamps, IP addresses. Every message was evidence. And with each interaction, Sullivan was building the case against himself. By week 3, Sullivan suggested meeting in person. He was explicit about his intentions, using language that left no doubt he understood Emily was a minor and that he was planning to engage in illegal sexual activity. He suggested a public location initially, a shopping mall, but quickly moved to suggesting somewhere more private. That's when we know they're ready to act, Chun noted. Once they start planning an actual meeting and discussing logistics, they've moved from fantasy to intent. That's when we set the operation. The meeting was arranged for a Tuesday afternoon at a park near a shopping center. Sullivan believed Emily would be skipping school to meet him. In reality, an entire law enforcement operation was being coordinated. The operation involved multiple units: the undercover officer who'd been communicating with Sullivan, uniformed officers positioned around the meeting location, detectives ready to conduct the arrest and interrogation, digital forensic specialists prepared to seize Sullivan's devices, and a crisis counselor in case any actual child victims were later identified. These operations require significant resources, explained Sergeant Michael Torres, who coordinated the sting. But the investment is worth it. Every predator we catch is potentially dozens of children protected. These offenders typically don't stop on their own. They escalate. Sullivan might have been targeting other children simultaneously. Every day he remains free is another day he's hunting for victims. At 2:47 p.m., Sullivan's vehicle entered the parking lot. Surveillance cameras captured everything: his arrival, his nervous checking of his phone, his scanning the area for the girl he believed he was meeting. He exited his vehicle carrying a backpack. Later investigation would reveal it contained condoms, alcohol, and rope items, suggesting he'd planned not just to meet Emily, But to ensure she couldn't escape or call for help, Sullivan walked toward the predetermined meeting spot, a bench near the playground. Detective Chen, dressed to appear younger than her actual age, approached. The moment Sullivan made contact, confirming he was there to meet the minor he'd been communicating with, tactical officers moved in. "Police, put your hands where we can see them. You're under arrest." Sullivan's reaction, captured on body cameras, was immediate shock followed by denial. "What? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just here to. You're under arrest for attempted enticement of a minor. You have the right to remain silent." The arrest was textbook, quick, efficient. No opportunity for Sullivan to flee or destroy evidence. His phone was immediately seized, preserving any active sessions or undeleted messages. His vehicle was searched pursuant to arrest, revealing the backpack contents and additional evidence. Sullivan was transported to the county jail for booking and interrogation. This is where many of these cases are won or lost in the hours after arrest, when suspects are processing shock and trying to calculate their options. Detective Torres led the interrogation. With Detective Chun present, they began by establishing the facts, Sullivan's identity, his understanding of why he'd been arrested, his acknowledgement that he'd been communicating with someone he believed was 14 years old. "David, we have all the messages. Every single one. We know what you said, what you sent, what you plan to do today. You can't delete them. We already have them preserved on our servers. So let's talk about why you're here." Sullivan initially attempted to minimize. He claimed he'd never intended to actually meet anyone, that the messages were just fantasy, that he was only there to tell Emily she shouldn't meet strangers from the internet. Investigators have heard every excuse. They're trained to cut through denials with evidence. "David, you brought condoms and rope. You traveled 40 minutes to get here. You specifically arranged this meeting during school hours when Emily said her parents wouldn't know. You sent explicit messages describing exactly what you planned to do. This wasn't fantasy. This was intent followed by action." Faced with overwhelming evidence, Sullivan's story changed. He claimed he had a problem, that he needed help, that he'd never done anything like this before. He suggested that the undercover officer had entrapped him by initiating sexual conversations. "Let me show you something," Torres said, pulling up the chat logs. "Here's the first 20 messages in your conversation with Emily. Every single one was initiated by you. Every sexual comment came from you. Every suggestion of meeting came from you. Emily, our officer, never encouraged you, never suggested anything inappropriate. She presented as a 14-year-old and you pursued her. That's not entrapment. That's predation." The interrogation lasted 4 hours. By the end, Sullivan had admitted to initiating contact, grooming Emily, and coming to the meeting location with intent to engage in sexual activity with a minor. His attorney would later try to suppress this confession, arguing coercion. But the video recording showed it was voluntary and properly conducted. Forensic analysis of Sullivan's devices revealed he'd been pursuing multiple minors online. Emily wasn't his only target, just the one where he'd gotten caught. Investigators found communications with at least 6 other accounts he believed belonged to minors. Some conversations were in early grooming stages. Others had progressed to planning meetings. Even more disturbing, investigators found evidence Sullivan had successfully met and victimized real minors in the past. Images on his devices matched missing children reports from 2 different states. Those children were identified and connected with victim services. Sullivan's arrest solved cases that had been cold for years. "This is common," explained FBI Special Agent Sarah Morrison, who works crimes against children nationally. "When we catch one predator, we often uncover multiple victims and ongoing targeting. These offenders don't typically have just one victim. They have patterns of behavior. Arresting one predator can solve multiple cases and protect numerous potential future victims. Sullivan was charged with attempted enticement of a minor, attempted sexual exploitation of a minor, possession of child sexual abuse material based on the images found on his devices, and multiple counts related to the other minors he'd been targeting online. His defense attempted several strategies. They argued entrapment unsuccessful, given the evidence showed Sullivan initiated everything. They argued he never intended to actually meet anyone, contradicted by his presence at the meeting location with materials suggesting premeditation. They attempted to suppress evidence, denied, as the arrest and searches were lawful. Ultimately, Sullivan accepted a plea deal, 25 years in federal prison with lifetime supervised release and registration as a sex offender. The alternative was going to trial, where prosecutors had overwhelming evidence and he'd likely face 40 years or more at sentencing. The judge's statement was uncompromising. You are a predator who used technology to hunt children. You targeted vulnerable minors, grooming them systematically, planning to sexually abuse them. The only reason you didn't succeed is because law enforcement was protecting children by posing as them. You believed you were meeting a 14-year-old child. You brought materials to facilitate sexual abuse. Your intent was clear, and your actions were deliberate. This sentence reflects society's determination to protect the most vulnerable among us from predators like you. Sullivan's wife filed for divorce immediately after his arrest. His children, teenagers themselves, had to process that their father was a child predator. His employer terminated him. His community ostracized him. His entire life collapsed because he believed he could prey on children with impunity. The operation that caught Sullivan is one of thousands conducted annually across the United States. Organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children coordinate with federal, state, and local law enforcement to identify and apprehend online predators. The internet has created unprecedented access for predators, Agent Morrison explained. They can reach thousands of potential victims from their living rooms. They can operate across state and international lines. They can use encryption and anonymity tools. But technology also gives us tools to catch them. Every digital interaction leaves a trace. Every message creates evidence. And undercover operations allow us to intercept predators before they victimize real children. The tactics used in these operations are carefully designed to avoid entrapment while still identifying predators. The undercover officer never initiates sexual content. They present as minors but don't encourage illegal behavior. They simply provide opportunity for predators to reveal themselves. We're not creating criminals, Detective Chun emphasized. We're identifying people who are already seeking to victimize children. If someone responds to a profile they believe is a minor by immediately initiating sexual conversation, they were already looking for victims. We just ensured the victim they found was law enforcement instead of a real child. Critics of sting operations sometimes argue they catch people who wouldn't have offended otherwise. But research and case evidence suggest otherwise. When investigators analyze devices of people caught in stings, they typically find evidence of prior offending or simultaneous targeting of multiple minors. These aren't one-time mistakes, they're patterns of predatory behavior. Sullivan was talking to 6 different minors when we caught him, Torres noted. He was active on multiple platforms. He had images of real victims on his devices. He wasn't some guy who made one bad decision. He was an active predator who'd been offending for years and would have continued indefinitely if we hadn't stopped him. The children Sullivan victimized in the past are now receiving support services. The children he was actively targeting were protected before he could meet them. And the potential future victims he would have found are safe because he's incarcerated. Parents often ask how to protect children from online predators. Law enforcement offers consistent advice. Monitor children's online activity. Teach them about grooming tactics. Establish open communication so they feel comfortable reporting uncomfortable interactions. Use parental controls. And remember that predators look normal. They're not strangers in dark alleys, but people in communities. Sometimes in positions of trust. David Sullivan is currently serving his sentence at a federal correctional facility. He'll be in his late 60s before release and will be required to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. His children have had to process that their father is a predator. His ex-wife is raising them alone while dealing with the trauma of discovering the man she married was hunting children. The operation that caught him continues daily across the country. Undercover officers pose as minors. Predators make contact. Evidence is gathered, arrests are made, and children are protected from people who view them as prey. Detective Chun continues her undercover work, now having participated in over 200 operations that resulted in arrests. Every predator we catch is potentially dozens of children saved, she reflected. That's what keeps me doing this work, despite how disturbing it is. Every message I have to read from predators, every graphic description of what they want to do to children, it's horrible. But the alternative is letting them find real children. And that's unacceptable. The predator caught in the act, arriving at a meeting location, materials in hand. Intent clear represents a critical moment where law enforcement intervention prevents victimization. These operations work. They catch predators. They protect children. And they send a message: law enforcement is watching. And anyone hunting children online may be talking to a detective instead of a victim.